The Red Raiders look to continue their 10-game home winning streak with another top 25 victory. This time it's the number 20 BYU Cougars set to invade the 806 and trying to keep Texas Tech atop of the Big 12 standings. Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's RC Maxfield here for the Back to 12 podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to like the video, hit that subscribe button, and most importantly, turn on that notification bell to stay in the know on Texas Tech men's basketball all year long. We've got you covered from game previews, game recaps, film breakdowns, and so much more. So if you want to join the most engaging Texas Tech community and the most viewed Texas Tech community here on YouTube, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell. All right, I want to hear from you guys before we get into today's preview. Let me know on the pinned comment down below your score prediction for number 20 BYU at number 25 Texas Tech. Two teams that I think a lot of people that cover the conference and even the national media did not have in the top 25 at this point in the year in terms of having it on their bingo card. But here we are, BYU, one of the better teams in the country, and so is Texas Tech. Let me know your score prediction down in the pinned comment below. All right, scene setter for Texas Tech and number 20 BYU. It'll be at United Supermarkets Arena with tip-off scheduled for 5 p.m. Central Time. You can watch the game on ESPN2, and we will have arguably my favorite duo of announcers in the Big 12 calling this game, and Rich Hollenberg, and of course, you got to mention Fran Fraschilla. So you can watch it over on ESPN2. Obviously, you can listen to Hacks over on Guns Up Radio as well. So that'll be cool to listen to him, and Chris Level will be on the call as well as his analyst for the number 20 BYU Cougars and number 25 Texas Tech Red Raiders. All right, the history between these two teams is very brief. BYU leads the all-time series by a record of 3-1. The Red Raiders will be playing the BYU Cougars for the first time as Big 12 opponents, whether that's in Provo or whether that's in Lubbock, Texas. Now, the last time that these two teams met up, actually, was in 1995. I was one. There you go. The Red Raiders earned an 81-71 victory over the Cougars over at the old Lubbock Municipal Coliseum. Shout out to those days. Now they use it for, well, a lot of tailgating, if you ask a lot of the football fans. But that's where the scene is right now. Now, other things you need to know about Texas Tech and this matchup with the BYU Cougars. Texas Tech is currently 1-1 against AP top 25 teams. We know who the one is in terms of the victory. We know who the loss is. It's against Texas and then against Houston as for the loss. Now, the KenPom rankings in this one, there's a large discrepancy. BYU is the 9th overall team according to KenPom, and they have a top 10 defense in the country. Texas Tech is ranked as the 34th best team in the country according to KenPom. Now, as for the net rankings, something that the committee uses to look at who should be in the tournament, BYU pretty damn near close to a lock at this point as they are the 4th ranked team in terms of the net rankings, while Texas Tech is at 41. One more time before we get into the players to watch for today's matchup, or I guess the number 20 BYU Cougars and the number 25 Texas Tech Red Raiders matchup set for Saturday. That'll be January 20th. Hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell to stay in the know on Texas Tech men's basketball all year long. We're giving you daily videos, whether that's about football, men's basketball, everything in between. We got some Big 12 overall umbrella stuff sprinkled in as well. So if you want to join one of the most engaging, not only Texas Tech communities, but Big 12 communities on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and turn on that notification bell. All right, let's start with the players to watch for number 25 Texas Tech, and it starts with Pop Isaacs. Over his last 2 games, he's been bad. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. He has been bad for Texas Tech when shooting the basketball. He is 6 for 27 from the field. That's 22% for people that can't do the quick math off the top of their head, like myself. And he's also shooting 4 of 17 from 3 for a lousy 23.5%. Now, Pop Isaacs is a streaky player. We all know that in terms of if you watch Texas Tech play. Before that, the 7 games prior, he was shooting 43% from 3. Okay, so he's a streaky guy, but you cannot have one of those down performances if you're Pop Isaacs, specifically at home against the top 20 BYU team that is really doing a lot of great things for Coach Pope out there in Provo. Now they come into a hostile environment in the 806. Raider Riot will be loud and proud, I'm sure of that, as well as Red Raider Nation. But Pop Isaacs has to perform better in the backcourt for Texas Tech. And speaking of the backcourt for Texas Tech, Joe Toussaint. Listen, I know it's, just laying it on in terms of adding, fuel to the fire and everything like that. But, I mean, I thought Joe had his worst game as a Red Raider against the Houston Cougars. And now, to be fair, it's the #1 defense in all of college basketball and one of the top 10 defenses over the past decade in college basketball. But I thought the thing that makes Joe's game great when he came into Texas Tech was his aggressiveness. And he was not aggressive really at all against Houston. That has to change against BYU for Texas Tech to have a chance, right? He has to be more aggressive in the pick and roll. He has to get downhill. He has to finish through contact. And if he doesn't want to finish through contact, he has to drive and kick. That is his role on this team. He is the captain of the ship offensively for Texas Tech, and he makes everyone around him better. That is his role, and he has to play an A-plus type game against the BYU team that has a plethora of guards that can defend him, but also can score. Joe Toussaint's going to have one of his better games of the year if Texas Tech wants to leave the USA with a victory on Saturday night. Now, Warren Washington, another guy we have to talk about just from the sheer standpoint of BYU, as we'll talk about a little later on in the video, has a trio of bigs that are good, okay? This is probably the most depth that Texas Tech will see from the bigs perspective in all of the Big 12, maybe Kansas, but really BYU was close to or not at the top. It's really 1A or 1B between them and Kansas in terms of their big depth, right? Texas Tech, as we all know, Warren Washington is really the only true big that Texas Tech has. He's going to have to play really, really well down low and get rebounds because second chance opportunities are going to be a killer for Texas Tech if that happens, because when is the best time to shoot a three-pointer? I'll give you just a second. If you said after an offensive rebound, you're correct. And that's what BYU does really, really well. They get a lot of offensive rebounds. And, oh, by the way, they shoot 37% as a team from three. Warren Washington and crew are going to have to limit that in terms of being effective on the glass for Texas Tech. But as we all know, it starts with Warren Washington and his slender but 7-foot frame. He's going to have to be a really good passer and maybe even get Texas Tech out in transition off of those rebounds. Now, on the BYU side, there's two guys for sure we need to know. The third that I'll mention here in just a second, he may or may not play. He actually missed the game against Iowa State, but he's one of the better players for the Cougars. Now, it all starts with Jackson Robinson. He's a former Arkansas transfer. He's been at BYU for a couple years now, but he is a legit first-round NBA talent, okay, and one of the best guards in the Big 12. And if somebody tells you differently, they need to go watch his game. Maybe they're like Shaq. I'm unfamiliar with your game. That's really what it is, because he leads BYU right now in scoring with 14.3 points per game. He has a shooting line of 45% from the field, 90% from the free throw line, and 39% from deep. Tech will need to know where Robinson is at all time. Simple and plain, he is a true difference maker, and it's going to be interesting to see who they put on Robinson with his frame, because he's a bigger guard. I would not be surprised if you see a guy like maybe Darion Williams, Kerwin Walton with some help, obviously, from Warren Washington down in the paint. But Robinson is a guy that every Red Raider fan needs to know about going into this BYU matchup. Another guy that Texas Tech fans need to know about is Noah Waterman. I talked about the trio of bigs that BYU has. Waterman is the guy that leads that way. A 6'11 New Yorker goes out to Utah, and he has been an effective player out there for Coach in Provo. Now, he's one of those guys that when you watch his game, he's more of a traditional big in a sense. Warren Washington's going to have a tough time with him. The issue is this. Waterman, albeit not crazy physical, you could see him come out and be a little bit more physical because he knows, and so does BYU, and specifically Coach Pope, hey, Warren Washington's really the only big that they have that has some experience. Why not just attack, and see what we have down there and see if we can get Warren Washington in foul trouble? That's where Warren Washington's going to have to be at his best. He's going to have to pick and choose when to be aggressive in terms of maybe those fouls, because if BYU can get him into foul trouble, Waterman and the other bigs on this Cougar offense will really have a field day down in the 806. Now, the guy that could play for BYU but hasn't been, hey, he's a for sure thing, is Trayvon Keel, okay? He's shooting 47% from three on 6 3-pointers per game. That is nuts. Again, he missed the Iowa State game. BYU won that game earlier in the week. but he has a foot injury. Will he play against Texas Tech? That's kind of up in the air right now, but he is a guy that Texas Tech has to know where he is at all times because he can just absolutely shoot the lights out. And if he does that, it just increases the chances of BYU winning. Now, the must-watch matchup of the game for me in this one is the guard play. We mentioned Robinson. We mentioned Pop. We mentioned Joe from the Texas Tech side, and Pop and Joe, excuse me, and then Robinson on the BYU side. Who is going to be more physical and who is going to be more aggressive without fouling and more aggressive, more importantly, in the pick and roll? If Texas Tech can be effective, more so Joe Toussaint be effective in the pick and roll, Texas Tech has a good chance of winning this game with the home court advantage. If he plays closer to how he played against Houston, and again, BYU has a really good defense, top 10 in the country, not as good as Houston. That's an historic defense right now, but BYU has a good defense. If Joe plays closer to how he played against the Oklahoma States and Texas, Texas Tech has a very good chance of winning this game, at least in terms of it increasing. Now, if he plays closer to how he played against Houston, it could be a long night at the office for Texas Tech, but that's what I'm watching in this one. As for the odds, KenPom gives the Cougars a 58% chance of beating the Red Raiders. Their model actually shows BYU winning this one 74-71. As for my prediction, I think Texas Tech wins at home because it is one of the most difficult places to win in all of college basketball, and it's a priority for Grant McCasland and crew to hold home court. I think Texas Tech does just that, and number 25 Texas Tech wins 71-68 over number 20 BYU. Hey, there's my prediction. I want to hear y'all's one more time on the pinned comment down below. Leave me your score prediction for number 20 BYU at number 25 Texas Tech, another top 25 showdown inside the USA, the first one in the Grant McCasland era for Texas Tech. If you haven't already, be sure to like the video, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell to stay in the know on Texas Tech men's basketball all year long, from previews, recaps, film breakdowns, and everything in between. We've got you covered right here on the most engaging and most viewed Texas Tech community on YouTube right here in the Back to 12 podcast channel.